tes. Is the Vice Mayor on? Okay, good, thank you.
Yes.
All right, I know Mr. Shelley will be here momentarily, but we'll go ahead and get started so we can, plow through our opening issues. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is the City of Homestead Community Redevelopment Agency meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 11th, 2021, and it is 5:50 p.m. The city will hold a hybrid CRA meeting. The public may participate in person at City Hall or virtually using video conference via WebEx events or the toll-free conference number. Please go to cityofhomestead.com/calendar for specific details and instructions on participation utilizing video and telephonic conferencing. The meeting can also be viewed live on the City Access Channel or City website at cityofhomestead.com. Public comments can be made in person at the meeting or emailed to publiccomments@cityofhomestead.com. Written public comments are limited to 300 words per comment and should include your name, address, item you'd like to comment on, and your comment. Those comments can be submitted by noon, Monday, May 10th, 2021, and will be included in the minutes. Written public comments on general matters should also include your name and address and can be submitted up until 30 minutes after the end of this CRA meeting and will be included in the minutes. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Board Member Roth,
Here.
Board Member Bailey,
Here.
Board Member Shelley,
Here.
Board Member Avila,
Here.
Board Member Fletcher,
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Fairclough Staggers,
Here.
Chairman Losner.
Here, thank you. All right, are there any deletions or deferrals? No deletions or deferrals. All right, we have before us the minutes of the April 13th, 2021 CRA Board meeting. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes?
Move it.
Moved by Councilwoman Bailey, seconded by Councilman Roth. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor? Any nays? All right, next item, tab 2, new business, car number 3165, first-time home buyers program. Mr. Pearl.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is a resolution of the Community Redevelopment Agency Board of the City of Homestead, Florida, approving the first-time home buyers program guidelines, providing for implementation and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Ms. Driver?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board members, property values and home ownership in the CRA area have been slow to increase since the Great Recession in 2008. Home ownership in the CRA area right now is only about 18% of homes are owner-occupied. Within the Southwest neighborhood, that rate drops down to 11.6. Recognizing that home ownership is the driving force behind revitalizing a community and promoting wealth-building opportunities, the CRA has created the First-Time Home Buyer Program to help provide down payment and/or closing cost assistance to individuals purchasing homes within the CRA area. Staff recommends that the CRA Board of Directors approve the attached resolution authorizing the Executive Director to implement the First-Time Home Buyers Program and program guidelines. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Driver. Any questions or comments from council? Councilwoman Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. Have we done anything like this in the past?
Back, it's been, I think, almost 30 years now, Turner Circle next to FICO Williams, that was built using, people that purchase homes in Turner Circle were giving assistance to purchase their homes. So we do have precedent with that property, that project.
I'm curious, out of the 11%, how many of those are in Turner Circle?
That's a good question. I would have to look that up and see.
Well, I think this sounds very promising. I hope that it's incredibly successful because I feel like it is a very small amount of money for us to allocate to make such a big change. Mm-hmm. So, best of luck. I hope it's incredibly successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair,
Thank you,
may
Board
I?
Member Bailey. Yes.
So when we first came up with the figure of $50,000, that was last year budget time. And the thought was, at that time, there was only one house on the market within that neighborhood, within the Southwest neighborhood. And so it had very limited inventory within not just the Southwest, but throughout the CRA, very limited available inventory. So in looking at, what do we think that we actually probably would be able to use this year, 50,000 was a guesstimate. And I can tell you that right now there are 5 houses on the market within the CRA area, and all 5 are in the Southwest neighborhood. So if we were able to assist everybody to get into one of those 5 homes, that would be $50,000. So the guess may have been, pretty accurate, but we won't know until we see how successful the program is and how people take advantage. But that was the reason why, is that we just don't have much inventory in the Southwest. And we're hoping to release a 30-day notice within the next couple of weeks to be able to, we have 4 properties owned by the CRA that are ready to be built on, so we could possibly build some homes on that. And then we're looking at other properties in the CRA that we could maybe do a phase 2 to have some homes built on. So, but that would be, several months out. We would hopefully be able to bring some proposals to you guys within the next few months from developers that would like to build on those properties.
Now, that's kind of what I was getting at, is if the program is successful, that would be a really easy way to improve the area. So, no, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Bailey. Was there? All right, Councilwoman?
Thank you. So if there's going to be any changes to the guidelines and qualifying guidelines, will that come back to us, or would that be an internal review and decision?
The way it's written, it would be an internal review and revision.
So for example, I see that a lot of the guidelines mirror the Miami-Dade County Economic and Advocacy Trust, which I appreciate. However, one of the guidelines here, for example, it says applicants cannot have held more than $10,000 of combined liquid assets within the last 6 months. So you would be requesting 6 months of prior bank statements, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that is, in comparison to the county program, that is double their requisite. And I find that to be a challenge because, especially right now with regards to tax refunds and stimulus checks, things of that nature, and even gift funds, you may need to have more than $10,000 even if you are obtaining grants and down payment assistance to be able to close the transaction. So I'm assuming you're going to be able to weed out what are some exceptions to those cases and make those decisions internally.
We can, but also if the board would like to make an adjustment to that number right now, we can do that as well tonight if it's the board's wish.
Yeah,
So whatever the recommendation would be, we'd be more than happy to make those adjustments.
it would be my recommendation to mirror the county's program as much as possible because it works. It reduces the amount of documentation that would have to be reviewed and underwritten. And for the purposes of qualifying under Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines, 6 months is really extensive. And I would probably, and keep in mind this $10,000 loan amount, and it is a loan because it is a silent second for 10 years, okay? It would have to be paid back if the property were to be vacated or sold within that 10-year period. So it is considered a secondary mortgage. But in that $10,000 amount, I don't foresee many of the applications getting the $10,000. Why? Because FHA loans have a cap on the combined loan to value you can have on a property. So I'm assuming the applicants for this program will likely also apply for the Miami-Dade County program. So I foresee more loans, more grants being issued than, let's say, 5, 10,000 for 50,000. Reducing the documentation requirements and making them meet the county will increase eligibility across the board and make it an easier, smoother program. That would be my recommendation.
Oh, to clarify, if I might, is it your concern that the time frame is too wide or that the amount is too low?
So I think the documentation requirement for the bank statements would be 3 months instead of 6 months. And I'm fine with the $10,000 amount because let's say, for example, they don't go to the county for assistance and they solely come to Homestead. That would be fine too, but I foresee that $10,000 amount not being realistic. I think that we're probably going to give out less amount per application due to the overlay of the financing guidelines with the maximum combined loan to values. So I'm fine. Initially, I was like $10,000. That might be a lot on a one-time grant application, but I think that the industry will work out those details.
Well, I thought your concern is that the amount of liquid assets was excessive. But you're talking about that the loan amount may violate other ratios through other lending mechanisms?
It's all three. And sorry, it is kind of convoluted and guidelines do kind of overlay. So the $10,000 loan amount for the grant, I'm fine with. The $10,000 maximum liquid cash, I think that that guideline itself needs to be eliminated because the county allows for up to $5,000 post-closing. You may need $20,000 to close on a transaction and still need down payment assistance. The way the guideline reads here, you cannot have had more than 10 grand to be eligible within the last 6 months. You may need to bring more than 10 grand to closing with your down payment assistance. The guideline should be not to have after closing X amount of money.
Or coming at it from another angle, would it be helpful if it was that not more than $10,000 in liquid assets, excluding stimulus payments and tax refunds? Because quite frankly, I don't know that a lot of folks are going to have their stimulus payments pop up on a bank statement. They ran to the bank and cashed those checks and didn't necessarily put them in the bank, so we would never see them anyway. But would that tend to keep people more honest, so to speak, and solve your concerns about that limitation?
Not necessarily. The clients that I see, the deposits are coming straight from IRS to the bank statements, to the bank accounts. They're direct deposits. It's more about, for example, a $280,000 house will cost you about $28,000 to close, including down payment. So if you have $20,000 and you just need that extra $8,000, according to this guideline, you're no longer eligible because you had the 20 grand in the bank within the last 6 months. Whether it was a gift from a family member, your own savings, or stimulus or tax refunds. So that's the guideline specific that I'm saying we should follow the county with.
Well, then let me ask the director, where did our $10,000, what was the rationale there?
This was what we understood that the county was offering. We thought this was part of their guidelines, the $10,000. So
No, I'm sorry, not the loan amount, but the liquid asset amount is what I'm addressing.
yes, that's what we understood was what the county was $10,000. So I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the $5,000 limit that you are expressing. But again, whatever, our goal is to get people in homes. And the target is the low to moderate income individuals. Typically, they don't have a lot of assets. So whatever is going to help to get them in a home, I'm okay with changing any guidelines. You know, you guys are the experts, you and Councilman Roth in real estate. So we're more than happy. If you think that needs to be changed, we'll definitely do it.
Mayor,
I
if
just
I
need to
may.
make sure I understand what the change is.
Mayor,
Yes.
maybe to satisfy Councilwoman's concerns, that $10,000 liquid asset would be higher, not lower, but higher, because if somebody had $100,000 in liquid assets, you probably wouldn't want to help that person. But I understand the Councilwoman's concern with regard to closing costs and having that money in the bank, so maybe if the $10,000 was $20,000 or something like that.
Go ahead.
Would I recommend being very familiar with the Dade County MDEAT program? Could I work with the director and fine-tune these guidelines? And would you be okay with her approving those changes to the program, assuming that they mirror the county's guidelines, Those would be my suggestions, that they would be mirroring. And so I can show her where, in the procedures manual for Miami-Dade County Economic and Advocacy Trust, where it specifically highlights the amount of funds you can have post-closing, the amount of, the number of bank statements that are requested, and I'm not familiar with an actual dollar amount that you're allowed to have had at any one point in the last 3 months or 6 months. What they do look for is movement of money, where you're transferring funds from one account to a hidden account, things of that nature. It's not necessarily a cash number that would disqualify you from qualifying. So just those little nuances. I think the program is great. I'd like to move it forward, but I think that there is some opportunity here to clean up the guidelines and the way that we process and underwrite these grant applications. And if she has the ability to make those revisions in-house, then I'm happy to help guide that process.
Then I'll ask, I guess I'll look to the manager or the director or the attorney. Those numbers have to be baked into whatever we approve that goes from here to council. It's not an open-ended situation. So in order to do that, we would have to make sure that this meshes with and perhaps doesn't quash the opportunity for folks to qualify for that first level of financing at the county, or whether it be another guaranteeing federal agency. So, I mean, if you're not comfortable that we do that, then I guess we're going to need to bring this back.
Well, Mr. Mayor, the way that this was teed up was to authorize the executive director to make future modifications because this is a pilot program and, we're getting off the ground. I think baked into this was the flexibility for the executive director to make changes as they came up because, perhaps some of the issues that the councilwoman has identified would have been realized as the process unfolded, and this was teed up to give Ms. Driver the flexibility to address those issues without coming back in order to, not stall the implementation of the program. If you'd like to come back, then you can instruct us to make a change, specific changes to that end, or we can just allow the executive director to make those changes, because that's the way the authorizing resolution was prepared.
And I'm okay with that, that we pass this conceptual framework with the discretion to make those changes that will help promote the program, absolutely. I'm getting hung up on having the lower amount of cash, because my concern with these types of programs has always been that you're putting folks in houses up front that they do not have the ongoing financial ability to maintain it, and the neighborhood doesn't get any better. And we're trying to make neighborhoods better with these programs, as well as put people in houses. But there's a better balancing act there. So that would just be my word of caution that we don't need to hand people a big bag of money and say, here's the roof over your head. Now you figure out how to maintain it.
Mr. Chair, so if I understand, Councilwoman Avila, the 6 months, your recommendation was that it be reduced to 3 months. Okay, so that's something that we can notate. And then the 10,000, if the board is in agreement, with that, we can make that change. And then also the 10,000, it sounds like the 10,000 is another thing that the board is going to have to decide on whether or not they want to reduce that, increase it. Are there other changes in here? Because I understood that those were your two concerns that you wanted to change. I mean, we can take care of that tonight. My concern is that we'd like to roll this out as soon as possible. And so we want to make sure that we have the board's blessing before we roll it out. So if you had other concerns, then yeah, maybe we need to talk about it further. But if those are the two, then I'd like to see if we can get direction from the board totonight how to address those two issues.
Thank you. And I do want to just comment on our chair's concern. Totally respected, and I think that there are some cases where that happens. In my almost 15-year experience doing real estate, specifically working with down payment assistance programs. I have yet to have one case of a foreclosure or a case where the applicant could not pay their mortgage or fall into a loan that they could not afford going through this process. In fact, it's such a gauntlet that they have to go through with FHA and down payment assistance that they end up being very true to the requirements of the loan and find themselves building wealth. And so yes, in some cases, the house is sold and they're able to upgrade and move up the property ladder. But in many cases, they stay there for those 10 years and maybe refinance and improve the home and improve the property as a result of having built that equity. I will note that there's a condition here to provide a certified inspection report by a licensed home inspector. This is not an FHA loan requirement. This is also not an MD requirement. There are Dade County down payment assistance programs, such as with like the bond program, that will require these things, but this is not one of the items that I would recommend that we have. A home inspection report is extremely recommended. There are provisions within the contract for inspections to be done, and that is at the sole discretion of the buyer and facilitated through the realtor. But aside from an appraisal to verify the market value and maybe insurance required inspections such as a wind mitigation or a 4-point inspection, a home inspection should not be a requirement for down payment assistance if we're trying to mirror the county program, which I recommend.
Councilman Shelley? Member Shelley?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess kind of chiming in policy-wise on the $10,000, no more than $10,000 in liquid assets. I mean, I think based on what Kate had said, I think someone on the region or the mayor, do I think that we should be providing these to potentially people with, $100,000 in, liquid assets in the bank? Maybe not, but 10,000 to me seems low. Again, based on the same idea that we're trying to improve the neighborhood. So we want to encourage people to invest in the particular neighborhood, whether it be the Southwest or CRA in general. And so I think that, excluding people that have more than $10,000 is somewhat counterproductive in my mind a little bit. So I do think there's some number between 10,000 and 100,000 that maybe we should have a cutoff at, but I do think 10,000 is too low because again, we want people to invest in the community. These same people are also going to need to buy a car. They're still going to need to buy, food. There's still all these other necessities of life. So you also don't want to say that, you don't have enough money to even get into the house and then you have no money to do anything else either. So I do think it's a little too restrictive there. So that's kind of my feeling. I think we should open that up and not have that much of a restriction. I'm okay with a 3-month type of window. The inspection report that just came up, I do somewhat feel that, again, we are investing as a city in that house a little bit, even though it's a very, very small portion of the total investment in the property. But I do think I want to make sure that we don't have property owners that go in and buy a property that's in need of a new roof, because they've decided, and I know right now the market is hot, so people are waiving inspections. They're doing a lot of things to get these properties. But I do think that my concern is that we kind of help buy into the property and then find out there's some major catastrophes into that property. And the homeowner ultimately gets stuck with that bill, but then the city doesn't get our benefit because they can't afford to even pay for the improvements, which means we didn't accomplish our goal. So I have a little concern about not requiring an inspection report because of that philosophy. So that's all. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, and I echo that exactly. I believe that we must have an inspection report. We are assisting people to buy what is their dream at that moment. And I'm not going to let them be carried away by their enthusiasm for first-time home ownership and not have them do appropriate due diligence to protect themselves and protect the investment of the city. A certified inspection report for me is a must when we are dealing with public money. Mr. Roth.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree that the 10,000 is a little bit hindering because they're going to need money after they close to do improvements, clean up, paint, landscaping, and things of that nature. I'd be okay with a $25,000 cap for that number. As far as the requirement of the inspections goes, most lenders are going to require a 4-point and a mitigation inspection, which is required for insurance as well, which would bring out some of the points of concerned with roofing or mechanical or plumbing or electrical, adding a independent homeowner's inspection is going to add more cost to the tenant, or I'm sorry, to the potential buyer, and it's not really required. Those that are waiving the inspections, with all due respect, are those that are paying cash money for overpriced properties as it is. And in this case, we're looking to improve and enhance a neighborhood with, people who have always said if they own the property, they're going to take better care of the property, and I think we can help them with that. It doesn't matter to me, require an inspection not, but it's a little overkill when the bank's going to require certain things already to do the financing, and then the insurance company is going to require it to, bind a policy for the roof and, things like that. So, but that, the no more than 10,000, I think, is a big deal to me, because they're going to need additional monies for the enhancements and the aesthetics and those things. It could be window treatments, could be whatever. They're going to need extra money. So I'd be okay with tonight doing that and saying it's 25,000. Let's move on, because, I don't know what the average cost of a house in the CRA or the Southwest area is, but it's probably in the $200,000 range. And if you're going FHA, you got to come up with at least 3.5% of that. So you're talking about 10 grand there, so, or 8 grand plus closing costs and all the other things. So I think it's a great program, and if we cap it at the 25 tonight, I think we can go.
Yeah, and I don't think that your inspection provision contemplates that they have to go get one specifically for the city. Certainly one that the primary lender would require could also be certified to the city. We're not asking for duplication of effort.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. We never thought that they would be precluded from using an inspection report that their lender required. We just need to see an inspection report.
And I'm good at the 25,000 asset level.
To clarify, the condition here says, cannot have held more than 10,000 of combined liquid assets within the last 6 months. So if this condition is meant to determine what their post-closing amount of assets would be, then that needs to be clarified. Okay? The county program allows only up to $5,000 after closing. So if your closing cost, cash to close, is $25,000 and you have $35,000 in your assets, you're not meeting the eligibility requirements. So we're not talking about identifying how much assets existed prior to closing. That's what this condition says. What I'm recommending is that we focus on what are their total assets after closing going to be, and what is that number going to be, what is that acceptable number. If it's 5, 10, 15, 20, that's the number we decide.
Is the county program 5 post-closing? Well, then, in my opinion, the county is promoting the deterioration of neighborhoods. If you're not allowing people to walk away with any more than $5,000 in their pocket, they're not buying a lawnmower, and they're not paying the yard man, and they're not painting the house. So why are we going to perpetuate the further deterioration of neighborhoods by continuing and following county guidelines?
With the exception of stating your specific needs of needing to purchase appliances, equipment, lawnmower, etc., there are exceptions that the director can make, as is done with the county. I'm fine with setting our own number. What I'm saying is that this particular guideline is referring to how much money you can have had within the last 6 months. It's not specifically clarifying what you can have post-closing. That is my concern there. We need to identify what is the allowed amount of assets in the borrower's assets after closing. That's one. With regards to the inspection, FHA does not require a home inspection. They do not. Insurance companies will require inspections. Those do not go to the lender. But depending on the age of the home, an inspection is not required. So if we are going to require an inspection, there are cases where an inspection would be an additional cost burden to the buyer in addition to their appraisal and whatever other third-party costs they pay, survey, flood insurance, etc. So I am fine with the first lender's loan approval for a standard FHA or conventional loan. I'm fine with having acceptable insurance in the file with us as a secondary mortgagee, and moving forward with the eligibility of the property according to it passing the first lender's approval and insurance purposes. Having that secondary independent inspection is burdensome to new buyers.
It's either burdensome before the closing or it's burdensome afterwards when they find out they bought a pile of junk. And there are not a whole lot of new houses in the entire CRA area. Probably the newest homes are the ones we've approved lately where somebody went from R3 to R1, but beyond that, we're probably talking about Fannie Star Turner estates that were built in the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew. And I am not going to adopt a program that perpetuates that kind of issue. So how can we, so we can adopt this with the change in the assets, the prior asset level. What was the other, Councilman? The
Mr. Chair, it was the month, 3 months versus 6
down to 3 months. Yes. You know, and if there is sufficient discretion in the director to make adjustments to more fully mesh with the county, I'm okay with that, but that would exclude waiving an inspection report certified to the city and the buyer. We owe that to our taxpayers and to the folks we're helping put in a home, that they go in with their eyes wide open as to what's wrong. Do we have a motion along those lines?
I'll move it, Mayor.
Thank you. It's been moved with subject to those changes, seconded by Board Member Shelley. Are there any further questions or comments? All right. Is there anyone either online or here wishing to speak on this matter?
None online.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing, and we have a motion. We've read the resolution. Roll call vote.
Board Member Fletcher,
Yes.
Board Member Shelley,
Yes.
Board Member Roth,
Yes.
Board Member Avila, Board Member Bailey,
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Fairclough Staggers,
Yes.
Chairman Losner.
Yes. Thank you all. Big step forward. Okay, we skinned up our boots a little bit, but it was a big step forward. All right, any further reports from the manager or the director? No general public comments? I have a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is the City of Homestead Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 11th, 2021, and the time is 6:24 p.m. The city will hold a hybrid Committee of the Whole meeting. The public may participate in person at City Hall or virtually, utilizing video conference via WebEx events or the toll-free conference call number. Please go to cityofhomestead.com/calendar for specific details and instructions on participation utilizing video and telephonic conferencing. The meeting can also be viewed live on the City Access Channel or city website at cityofhomestead.com. Public comments can be made in person at the meeting or emailed to publiccomments@cityofhomestead.com. Written public comments are limited to 300 words per comment, and all comments should include your name, address, the item you're commenting on, or whether it's a general comment, and can be submitted by noon Monday, May 10th, and will be included in the minutes. Written public comments on general matters can be submitted up until 30 minutes after the end of the committee of the whole meeting and will be included in the minutes. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilman Roth,
Here.
Councilwoman Avila, Councilman Fletcher,
Here.
Councilwoman Bailey,
Here.
Councilman Shelley,
Here.
Vice Mayor Fairclough Staggers,
I'm here. I'm sorry. For some reason, I was muted by the host, but I'm here.
Mayor Losner.
I'm here. Thank you. Are there any additions, deletions, or deferrals, Madam Manager?
No, Mr. Mayor, there are not.
Thank you. We have before us the minutes of the April 13th, 2021 Committee of the Whole. I'll entertain a motion for approval of those minutes. Moved by Councilman Roth.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Fletcher. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Thank you. Next item is a motion to place car number 3160 on the council agenda, lease financing for 3 solid waste trucks. That's tab 2. Is that you, Madam Manager?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is for the leasing of 3 solid waste trucks, 2 side loaders, and 1 front end loader. The 3 trucks are part of the city's capital improvement plan, CIP 2042 and 2201, and were approved for purchase at the November 18th, 2020 council meeting. At that time, council was notified that due to the lead time needed between the ordering and the delivery of the vehicles, approximately 6 months, it was best to order the vehicles and then come back with financing closer to the expected delivery date in order not to incur additional financing costs. The total cost of $896,220 is part of the original CIP plan, and the financing of the 3 trucks was budgeted for the fiscal year 2020-2021 in the Solid Waste Fund. Per a May 3rd, 2021 BCI capital lease financing proposal at an interest rate of 1.4% over a 7-year term, annual lease payments would be $135,300 beginning in fiscal year 2022 for a total of $947,105.95. Staff recommends that the mayor and council approve the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to finance the purchase of 3 solid waste trucks through the City National Capital Finance Master Lease.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? No questions or comments from council. Thank you. All right, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone either online or here in the chambers who would like to speak on this matter?
None online.
None appearing. We'll close the public hearing. And I'll entertain a motion to place this car number 3160 on our council agenda, lease financing for 3 solid waste trucks. Moved by Councilman Roth.
Second.
Seconded Councilwoman Bailey. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next item, tab 3, motion to place car number 3153 on the council agenda, declaring surplus property of the city of Homestead. Madam Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Several city departments, through procurement, have determined that the attached list of miscellaneous items have outlived their usefulness and are no longer adequate for their intended purpose. Since it is no longer cost-effective to keep these items in operation, the city will auction them off as surplus. This is done on a regular, as-needed basis. Staff recommends that mayor and council approve the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to surplus the attached list of miscellaneous items that will be sold by means of an online auction or disposed of by other authorized procedures as per City Code Section 2-440, surplus property.
Thank you. Any initial questions or comments from council?
questions,
Councilman
Mr. Mayor?
Fletcher.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When it comes to providing these surplus auctions, the funds that we get back from those, are those deposited back into a general fund, or are they deposited back in each department's that equipment came from back into their funds?
Mayor, Council, it would go back to whatever it originated, where it was purchased out of. So if it was electric utility that purchased it, the funds from the auction proceeds would go back into that fund.
Okay, and my second question is just if, after the auction is completed, can we get a breakdown of what items actually went for sale and what we got compared to the items that we also just?
Yes,
Sorry.
absolutely.
Thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Councilman Fletcher. Any further questions or comments? All right. Open the public hearing. Is there anyone online or present who would like to speak on this matter?
Seeing none online?
All right, close the public hearing, and I'll entertain a motion to place car number 3153 on the council agenda for City of Homestead surplus property.
Move approval.
Moved by Councilman Fletcher, seconded by Councilman Shelley. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Tab 4, motion to place car number 3163 on the council agenda. The FMPA piggyback on multiple bid awards. Is that Utilities Director or you, Madam Manager?
That's me, Mayor. Thank you. The City of Homestead Electric Utility was awarded a FEMA grant of $2,202,267.60 for storm hardening of the southwest section of the city, which consists of the installation of concrete poles and associated hardware to upgrade the city's existing electrical infrastructure. The electric utility is on a condensed time frame to complete this project and desires to expedite the procurement process by using existing Florida Municipal Power Agency agreements. The FMPA regularly issues competitive bids for many different electrical infrastructure items and services, and as members of FMPA, the City of Homestead is entitled to participate in these bids. Staff recommends that the Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution authorizing the City Manager to utilize the following FMPA bid awards on an as-needed basis. Concrete pole bid ITB 2018-010. Overhead transformer bid ITB 2019-005 and 2019-005A. Pole line hardware bid ITB number 2020-022. Wire and cable bid ITB number 2018-006.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Any questions or comments from council? Councilman Roth.
Thank you. Just a question in reference to, I like the fact that we're hardening that system out there in the southwest section, but looking towards the future, is it possible to go underground over there or no?
Councilman, we did apply for an additional grant to go underground, but we were not successful in getting those monies. Typically, when you've got existing facilities, the cost to go underground is about $1 million a mile, and so it's a costly proposal.
So could there be, and I'm just thinking, usually if we get a storm through our area, that area, the southwest and the northwest, I think the northwest is still above ground too in some areas, and even outside of the city limits, I think we have a lot of stuff in the air still. Those are the bigger concerns when a storm comes, that whether it be tree limbs and falling debris knocks out the power to those areas, and it takes far more effort to get that restored than it does, let's say, on the east side of the city. Just something to think about for the future for everybody, that if there's a way, if there's monies available continuously, maybe we can do grid by grid, block by block, I don't know, but to plan something for the future so that we don't have those issues on the west side of the city. Not today, I get it. It's going to be very expensive. I get that too, but maybe there's a way to think about that in the future to figure out what it would actually cost us to do if it could be done in stages. And because of the hurricane activity over the last decade or so has been pretty active for us. And I just think that if we can think that way, I don't know if it's possible, but
Well, all new service is underground. And new subdivisions that come along, those are placed underground. We have about 160 miles of overhead lines, so at $1 million a mile, you know, it gets expensive. I will continue seeing if we can get grant money to support our efforts with undergrounding, and we slowly do move facilities underground. For example, here in the downtown area, we have placed previously overhead facilities underground in the downtown area, and it's a slow process, but we do try to put the facilities underground when we're doing some sort of betterment in an area. So we could look at a more robust plan around that. And I think that was what you're asking for, is that we come up with some sort of a long-term plan to do additional undergrounding.
Just keep it in the back of your mind that I think we should eventually try to get as much as we can protected from weather. That would be my thought. That's all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. And in addition to that, there's the aesthetic of it.
Yeah.
Big time. Well, and along those lines, you know, and in the last year or so, it's come up, and I've forwarded citizens' concerns. I would just ask that when we are resetting these new poles, let's be mindful of the aesthetic, and just because it's in the middle of somebody's front yard, if we can do so, let's put it out on the corners rather than in the middle of their sight lines, because, you know, the intent is that concrete pole is going to be there a long time. Any further from council on this? Okay. Anyone present or online wishing to speak on this matter?
No request online.
Thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion to place car number 3163 on the council agenda. Moved by Councilman Roth. I'll second it. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is tab 5, motion to place car number 3129 on the council agenda. ITB number 2021-09, removal and replacement of rapid infiltration trench number 1. Fill us in.
Yes, indeedy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City of Homestead wastewater treatment plant is required by the Environmental Protection Agency to meet standards for the collection and treatment of domestic sewage and wastewater, which is vital to public health and clean water. This bid is for the removal and replacement of rapid infiltration trench number 1, which is used to retain stormwater runoff and promote water quality improvement. Staff recommend, well, actually, this project is part of the City of Homestead's Capital Improvement Plan, CIP number 454, and staff is recommending that the mayor and council authorize the city manager to award bid number 202109, removal and replacement of rapid infiltration trench number 1 to RG Underground Engineering, Inc., in the amount of $83,900.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Councilman Fletcher?
Yeah, just looking at the bids overall, the low bidder, of course, was roughly $50,000 less than the next 3 bidders. So I just want to make sure we're doing our due diligence and ensuring that we're not going to get a lot of scope changes, you know, as we move through these projects, because that's a big difference.
It's a straight bid, Councilman, so there should be no problem at all in that regard.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Fletcher. All right, is there anyone either online or present who would like to speak on this matter?
No request online.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing, and I'll entertain a motion to place car number 3129 on the council agenda, ITB number 2021-09, removal and replacement of rapid infiltration trench number 1, capital improvement and project number 454. Do we have a motion for approval? Councilman Fletcher? Moved by Councilman Fletcher. Seconded by Councilman Shelley. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, next item, tab 6. Motion to place car number 3171 on the council agenda. Amendment to professional service agreement. Madam Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve Taylor has been the city's emergency manager since 2016. His responsibilities under the current contract include, among other things, the management of the city's emergency operations center, disaster mitigation planning, preparation, response and recovery, coordination of emergency preparedness and response. He's the intergovernmental liaison representing the city on various internal and external task forces and committees. The amendment to this agreement includes additional duties, the most significant of which is coordination of the city's response to public health crises. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Taylor has repeatedly stepped up and taken on more responsibility to meet the ever-increasing demands that the city has faced. He played a key role in the city's efforts to facilitate testing. Since the vaccine became available, he has been instrumental in securing the Sports Complex County Vaccination County site. Over 11,000 first and second doses combined have been issued. Harrisfield pop-up site, 400 first doses have been issued. FICO Williams CHI vaccination site, 400 first and second doses combined. And also a 3-year commitment with the Florida Department of Health, recently approved by this council, for the right to operate a distribution center, a pod, in the city to deal with future health crises. And I can assure you that days and nights and weekends, he is out there visiting each site to ensure efficiency. He also took the lead on the city's efforts at local, state, and federal levels to secure reimbursements in the amount of $13 million from FEMA for eligible Hurricane Irma expenses. He helped secure a $2.2 million FEMA hazard mitigation grant for the hardening of electric utilities. His is not a salaried position, and as such, there are no other benefits. A survey of maximum salaries for a comparable position in Miami-Dade County showed a range from $73,528 to $143,258. The compensation for the amended contract with the additional duties will increase from his maximum cap from $65,000 to $80,600. He's an individual with decades of emergency management training, holds numerous certifications, and he is a tremendous asset to the city. He's dedicated, tenacious, and has an unwavering focus on protecting our city and helping others. And Steve is with us tonight, and one other thing I want to tell the council is that this was not his idea. He did not know about this. Well, he knows about it now because he's here, but it was brought to my attention, and I'm only sorry it wasn't brought to my attention sooner and I didn't bring it sooner. So with that, staff recommends that the mayor and council approve the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the First Amendment to the professional service agreement for the city's emergency management consultant.
Thank you, and I understand that he is personally guaranteed to stand at either Flamingo or Bayfront Park this summer and take responsibility for steering hurricanes away. He assured me.
I'm not sure how you knew that, but you're absolutely right.
He assured me in the hallway before we came in here that he would.
We used to call him Hurricane Man, but now we don't know what to call him.
He would do that. So, any questions or comments from council? Okay. Anyone online or in the chambers wishing to speak on this matter?
None online.
So we'll close the public hearing, and I'll entertain a motion to place car number 3171 on the council agenda. An amendment to professional services agreement moved by Councilman Roth. Seconded by Councilman Shelley. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, our next item is tab 7. For discussion purposes, car number 3137, Department of Economic Opportunity, Community Development Block Grant CV Funds application. Is this yours?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is actually a follow-up to a meeting held back in March when we advised the council that the State of Florida Department of Economic Opportunity had announced the availability of additional CARES Act funds for Florida's entitlement communities. Homestead's share of these funds, as you may recall, is $502,061. These are additional CARES Act fundings, and to receive them, the city will have to apply through the DEO's application portal. Prior to that, we had to conduct a pre-application public hearing, which is what we did back on March 9th, 2021. At that hearing, there was one additional suggestion for how the money should be used, and that was for transportation to vaccination sites, which is now included. So the purpose of this agenda item is to get council approval for the listed programs for submission of the pre-application. The next step will be to conduct a second public hearing and then submit the final application. Funding will most likely be under contract by the fall of 2021, and the contract will be between the state of Florida and the city. Staff recommends that the mayor and council approve the use of the funds in the following ways. Small business grants, $161,897. Housing and utility assistance, rent and mortgages, $200,000. Meals, grocery gift cards, $90,000. And vaccination efforts, including transportation, $10,000. Administration under the terms would be $40,164.
Just to clarify, for the small business grants and the housing utilities assistance is citywide. This is not limited to the CRA area. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Very good. All right. So some of the constraints that we have in the CRA grant program, we could revisit as we go
Yes.
citywide.
Yes.
Looking forward to that. All right. Any questions or comments from council? All right. Hearing none. Initially, is there anyone online or in the chambers wishing to speak on this matter?
No request to speak online.
Thank you. Then I'll ask for a motion to, what would be the motion to adopt the itemization?
Move it.
Because this was put here as a discussion item.
Yeah, if it's just a discussion item, so now we can submit the pre-application, so you don't need the motion.
Okay, very good. All right. All right. So next item, tab 8, card number 3168 for discussion. Amendment to Chapter 28 Utilities, Energy Charge Reallocation.
That's me, Mr. Mayor. By ordinance, all electrical customer rate classes are charged a set energy cost per kilowatt hour of consumption. A portion of this charge goes toward the calculation of the power cost adjustment and is applied to total power generation costs. The current ordinance allocates 0.0372 cents of the set energy charge toward those power generation costs. The remaining amount goes toward electric utility operations. With power generation costs decreasing in the last 10 years, this proposal is to lower the amount that goes to power generation and decrease that amount from 0.0372 cents down to 0.0350. This would move an additional 0.0022 cents per kilowatt hour to be moved over to utility operations, or roughly $1.2 million annually. The resulting power generation component, 0.0350 plus the current PCA of 0.022, a total of 0.057, would still be sufficient to pay for current power generation costs. And importantly, the customers would see no change to their billing rates with this proposal. And the discussion is to see whether or not we should amend the ordinance to allow for that change in that ratio. And I know that Barbara has a presentation. If you'd like to hear it, we can see it and listen. It's whatever your pleasure is, Mr. Mayor.
Well, let's let it be on the record. We produced it, let's play it.
It's not pre-recorded, so I'll go through it. Thank you. Yeah. So good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of council and citizens of Homestead. It's always an honor to speak with you all. This evening, we bring an ordinance change for your review and consideration. We want to start by highlighting the fact that Homestead has the second lowest electric rate in the state of Florida. And we thank the mayor and council for your support in making this happen. At the same time last year, Homestead's rate was in the middle of the pack, but through the use of new purchase power agreements, which were approved by council, and through wise resource management, Homestead, as you can see, has now moved to the front of the pack. And we're shooting to take over that lead position, but hoping to make that happen. Our rates are currently lower than 95% of the other Florida municipals and the Florida municipal and investor-owned electric utilities. Also, There we go. If you look at how Homestead compares to the rest of the nation, you can see that Homestead has made a significant reduction to our rates over time. And while the U.S. average residential rate for electricity has continued to climb, Homestead's rates are down by 21% since 2009, and the average U.S. residential rate in that same time frame has increased by 15%. So you can see the progress that we've made over time with our rates. Pushing the there. Oh, okay. I guess something's off with my aura here. I don't know. And while we're very excited with the improvements that we've made to our electric rates, we do have some operational challenges that we want to discuss with you. The ordinance change that we're proposing will help us to keep our rates as the second lowest in Florida, but this change will offer us more flexibility in placing the dollars into the right buckets for our department needs. Here we have two charts showing the trends for two aspects of the electric utility operation. As you can see in the chart on the left, the costs to Homestead for generating power have declined significantly since 2008. They've gone from $86 per megawatt hour down to an estimated $57 a megawatt hour for 2021. And as you saw in the previous slides, when our power generation costs go down, this reduction to our fuel cost is passed along to the customers in the way of lower bills. As mentioned, Homestead's electric rates are now lower than 95% of the other electric utilities in the state. The 34% decrease in power generation cost is due to a shift to lower cost fuels by staff through better management of both on-site generation and the purchase power contracts which Council has approved. These savings have been realized while the Consumer Price Index has gone up by 24%. The chart on the right shows a corresponding 7% increase in non-generation operational costs for the same time frame, which when compared to the 24% increase in CPI, also shows good fiscal responsibility by the HPS Energy staff. And some additional detail behind the increased operational costs from 2008 to present include payroll increases due to cost of living adjustments and also significant increases in the cost of materials and equipment. You can see that the materials and equipment are up by 250%, so that's a huge hit for us. Payments to vendors and for services have also increased over time. We've also experienced extensive growth in the city, adding to the miles of electrical lines that need to be maintained. Even with fewer employees than in years past, the HPS Energy Group has consistently found ways to do more with less, but we've now reached a tipping point where additional funds need to be shifted from one bucket to another to cover operational expenses. Necessary spending on improvements has also lowered our reserve amount, and the reserve levels need to be rebuilt. The standard reserve amount for an electric utility of our size is in the 15% range, and we do not currently have that amount set aside in our reserves. It's also important to note that in the last 20 years, since 2001, there's only been one rate increase to cover higher operational costs. That rate increase was in 2008 for 1.3%. There have been no increases since 2008 to cover any operational expenses. And again, the increase in 2008 was a 1.3% increase over the 2001 rate. The proposal that we have for your consideration this evening is to take the energy charge of 7.2 cents per kilowatt hour, which is laid out in city ordinance, and shift a small portion of that away from an allocation towards power generation where it's not needed and over towards non-generation operational costs where it is needed. As this is just a reallocation of the percentages to different components in an existing codified energy charge, the customers will see no impact to their bills. The code changes a small adjustment to the power cost adjustment calculation formula as shown here. The PCA calculation is used to throttle cost up or down depending on the actual cost of power generation on a monthly basis. This is typically tied to fuel cost and to the mix of generation resources and fuel types used. When power generation costs go down, as we've seen in the last 12 years, the PCA amount goes down. If the costs were to go up, the PCA would go up by a corresponding amount. The PCA is a pass-through charge, and it only allows for the actual billed cost of power generation to be covered. No other costs are included. If you want any more detail on the formula, we could discuss that. The formula was created in 1988, and as you've seen, our recent review of expenses and allocations to different areas of the electric utilities budget indicates a need to revise the formula. So thank you for your time this evening, and we can take any questions that you have.
Thank you, appreciate that. And I just want to say, you know, they're not tooting their own horns here. Over the last couple of months, potential businesses that are looking at Homestead for a use that would require a major consumption of power have done their due diligence and gotten up to their elbows in the minutia and the technical details of what we do and what it costs to do it. And they were very complimentary as to the advantageous purchase power contracts as well as the fuel contracts that we've entered into in the last year to 2 years. Very, very positive, very, very complimentary. So, you know, and again, as I've said, I don't know what the background of this allocation was in 1988, but, you know, there'll be no impact to our consumers. But, you know, the backdrop is that we've done a really good job in the last couple of years of making this a very efficient and cost-effective for our customer base. Council? So you just need some direction to go forward to bring an actual amendment to the ordinance forward?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if the direction is to go forward to amend the ordinance to adjust the rate, then we will come back for first reading at the next meeting.
Good. Anyone in opposition to this? Mr. Roth?
No, I'm not in opposition to this. Yeah, I did. You're quick. No, I just wanted to say, you know, we may have allowed these things to happen, but it's because of you, Barbara, and staff that brought these ideas and these plans to us so that we had the opportunity to make it better for our citizens and give you the opportunity to lower utility rates. So I just want to say we appreciate you, or I appreciate you for what you've done, your efforts, and making this a reality. I mean, to be second from the lowest priced utility in the state of Florida, we had this conversation last week. I don't know how you get that message out, because the perception is obviously a little different than that, because if you live with Homestead Utilities, you're getting everything on one bill, so they assume that our bill is much larger than FP&L, which only charges them for electric. So kudos to you, your staff, for bringing those opportunities to us, and kudos to us up here for making those opportunities a reality for you guys. So thank you for everything you do, and just keep doing it. I still want underground utilities, though. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. Just for council, one question that I posed, and, you know, it was a whole different political world here in 1988 when it came to the electric utility, that they're locked into this allocation. I mean, certainly any actual increases in the rate would come back to us. But would it be advisable to give you the flexibility to make those adjustments as you deem fit on a month-to-month basis rather than have to come back to us for every micro penny of adjustment? I would not have a problem seeing that in the actual amendment to the ordinance. Councilman Shelley?
You actually were right where I was going to go as well, which is I think, we discussed it during our meeting that, the actual rate, yes, should stay within the purview of council, but where that goes to power generation cost or operational cost, and what that vision is within that overall, seems more like a management decision. And I'm not sure exactly why they council at that time wanted control over those small variations. So I'm with the mayor. I mean, I'm okay with if you guys bring back some sort of an amendment that includes that. We can have further discussion then. Maybe there's some background you guys need to bring to our attention. But as I sit here now, I'm okay with that. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. Anything? Council? Do you have clear enough direction?
Crystal clear. Thank you all very
good.
much.
Crystal clear. I think I came from a movie. All right.
Thank you.
Final item. Save the fun for last. Tab number 9, car number 3131, the Southwest Maori Drive Murals Corridor Pilot Program. Madam Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item proposes a code amendment establishing a pilot mural program along the Maui Drive corridor located within the Southwest neighborhood, commonly referred to as the Maui Murals. For purposes of this pilot mural program, the Maui Drive corridor is generally defined as that geographical area located within the Southwest neighborhood, which includes Maui Drive and properties adjacent to Maui Drive running between Chrome on the east and 187 Avenue on the west, excluding corner properties having frontage adjacent to Chrome Avenue. The item establishes an overview and framework of the proposed pilot mural program, establishing definitions, intent, procedures, and review criteria. And in this item, there's 4 different options for the council to consider, and I will ask James, who's here with us, to explain those to us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, and if you recall, the genesis of tonight's discussion took place really back in at our March council meeting. At that time, Councilwoman Bailey I'd worked with Councilwoman Bailey to prepare an agenda item for your consideration, which was an overview of a pilot mural program along the Maui corridor in the Southwest neighborhood. And at that meeting, we started to talk about how the approval and implementation of the pilot program would be carried out. And that sort of landed with really the policy discussion for consideration by you all with respect to how you envisioned or wanted this pilot program to be reviewed and ultimately approved. And so I think everyone sort of had a different take on that. And so I recommended that I would come back to you with some options for your consideration as to how this could be reviewed moving forward. And so for consideration this evening, I've put together 4 different options that would be various options with regards to the mural application coming in and what happens once it hits development services and moves through the process for ultimate approval. And so I can go through those 4 with you and then certainly answer any questions that you may have. So the first option essentially is the administrative option. Someone would come into development services, they would apply for a mural permit application. Development services staff would review that and they would approve the mural permit application based on the ordinance and the requirements of the ordinance. If an applicant was denied, they would be able to appeal that decision, development services decision, to the city manager. The city manager could make would make a decision as to whether or not staff to uphold staff's determination to deny it. And if they were unhappy with that determination from the city manager, it would come to you as the final arbiter with regards to the decision by staff and the city manager. Option 2 would be where the application for a mural permit application is submitted to Development Services. Development Services reviews that and provides a recommendation directly to you, City Council. And then you all would then approve or deny the mural permit application. So Development Services staff recommends, then comes directly to you. The third option involves the Public Art Committee. And this option, although it's not articulated in short form, Development Services would receive the application, make sure the application's complete. They would not render a recommendation under this option to the Public Art Committee. They would just forward the application to the Public Art Committee. The Public Art Committee would then render a final determination on the application to approve or deny. And if someone wanted to appeal that determination by the Public Art Committee, it would then come to you all for final review. And that's very similar to how we have the Historic Preservation Board set up. When the Historic Preservation Board, they have final authority with respect to granting a certificate of use or a designation to a property, or to make changes or modifications to the exterior of a historic landmark. If someone's unhappy with that determination, it comes to you in the appeal format for the final determination. The last option, the fourth option, is the option that's the most layered approach, and that currently follows the same format that most of your land development regulations, land development applications follow. And in this sense, Development Services would receive the application, they would make the recommendation to the Public Art Committee, which would be analogous to the Planning and Zoning Board in this case. The Public Art Committee would then review staff's recommendation and the application, and then they would render a recommendation to you all, and you all would be the final reviewing authority with respect to whether or not to grant the permit. So those are the options available for consideration. I mean, certainly if we can think of another one, but I think I've covered the possible avenues of approval with regards to this for you here. So, I'm happy to answer any questions. And we had envisioned coming back with an ordinance that had these various options, a draft ordinance for your review, but Councilman Bailey is still having some input from the community on certain aspects. And so she'd asked that this be moved forward for your review and consideration. And then depending on what you all decide tonight, we would then gauge how to come back to you or incorporate this into a draft ordinance for further review and consideration.
Councilwoman Bailey, you want to kick off the conversation?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, James. So, as promised, here are some options. The only thing I would like to state again is that I'm not as worried about the time that it would take for it to go through the different avenues. I think it's great. I would definitely love to see PAC involved. What I'm worried about is the additional fees that come along with the layers. And the last thing to keep in mind is that once we set the parameters to the ordinance and what is on the application, there is going to be very little that we have to say regarding a denial. So as much as we would like to see these different layers, in the end, we really need to focus on what the application asks for. And as long as they check all those boxes, it would be really hard to deny something. Thank you.
Thank you. Kind of left us hanging there. Councilman Shelley?
Yeah, Councilwoman Bailey kind of hit on what my big concern was. And I think one of the things I had voiced at the last time we had this discussion, which was, finding that balance between expediting, but also having some ability to have a say in what type of art is going maybe in a particular location and the costs and fees associated with that. So do you guys have an estimate on what that fee range would be? Say from obviously probably the most streamlined and cheapest would be the administrative review through the most intensive, which would be, I guess, number 4, which would be the full review process of administrative, public art committee, council, approval. What is that range as far as cost? Do we have an idea what that is? Because that's a big consideration, I know, from a developer standpoint. Now, whether or not we're going to have the same type of fee schedule as a developer for a mural, but if you could get some sort of guidance, then that would be helpful.
Councilman, I did have some discussions with Development Services about this, and obviously, as you said, the first option would be with the least expense, and the fourth being the most expensive. And I know Development Services on the line, but I'll preface any comments they have by a lot of the costs would be determined on how detailed and complete the application is, regardless of which option the council would determine what they would like to see go forward. But with that, Michelle, if you want to add to that, please do.
Yeah, just before the explanation comes in, I think what I'm looking for is just a ballpark range. Is it $100 for the administrative review, and it's $10,000 for the full blown event, or is it where are we in apples to apples here? So that as we're trying to figure out which option makes the most sense, we're also realizing that these applications may be by property owners who may have the ability to make payments. On the other hand, it may just be by artists who are looking to come in and display their artwork, which I think what we're trying to encourage is some art being displayed by local artists or other artists. And so that factors into making these policy decisions. So.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Michelle Lopez with Development Services. Staff considered these questions, and we viewed this as more of a process that city staff would process. And so, as the council stated, and I think the manager reiterated, the less layers of oversight that we have to go through would make it more economical. So in the first option, it's purely administrative. The city planner would receive the application, review it internally, and then render a decision to approve or deny. And that decision would be based on whatever the parameters are in the ordinance. Again, we fall into First Amendment rights, so we would have very limited ability to deny an application. With the other options, as we start moving into public meetings and agenda preparation, again, that's something that city staff could do internally and not outsource to the consultants or have the attorneys review the documents. We think that should be the intent, to make this a little bit of an easier process and to make it more economical.
Yeah, and it kind of, you speak to kind of what I think the generalities are, but I guess the answer is right now we don't have any idea cost-wise one versus the other. I mean, ultimately, I guess we set those costs. I mean, we can determine whether or not we want to lose money or make money or break even on these fee schedules as we set them forth. And I guess maybe that's the bigger discussion to have, and it may become irrelevant about what the real costs are. But I do think that, having, next time we have this discussion, potentially, having some harder cost or some idea of, are we talking hundreds or thousands, and then how many more thousands as we go up each layer, would be helpful. I mean, and with all that being said, I guess while I still have the floor, I probably prefer option 3, I guess, would be probably my leaning, which would give the admin review, but then you would have a public art committee, which hopefully are, experts or specialists in what is art and what's considered art, and they would be able to render that decision. I'm probably preference to that versus having a more long drawn out process, or versus just having a pure admin, where again, because of First Amendment issues, the admin's never going to be able to weigh in on policy, or at least the art committee has some ability to, make some arguments or some rationale on why they prefer one piece of artwork versus another piece of artwork. when that won't be able to be done at the admin level. So that's kind of where I am at this point with what limited knowledge I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Fletcher?
Yeah, just trying to realize what those actual costs are. You know, we have a city planner who's a salaried employee. So there's real no cost there. You know, I think the only place we start looking into additional costs are when we start getting city attorneys to look at issues. I'm leaning towards option 4, but I could be persuaded to lean towards option 3. But I want to make sure we have those different layers in there. And if we feel substantially confident in the way that the individuals that we've chosen for the Public Arts Committee are going to perform their duties, I'm fine with option 3. So with that, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. And I agree, you know, and I think I'm one of the ones who talked about injecting the Public Art Committee into this process. Of course, you knew this was coming. How about option 5? Option 5 would be a hybrid of of 3, where you'd have the Development Services Department take in the application and issue its recommendation and kick it to the Public Art Committee. And if both recommendations were affirmative, it goes forward. If they're both denied, it would come here to council. Or if there were conflicting recommendations, it would come to council. But so long as both the Development Services Director and the art folks were in accord, it doesn't come to this level. I believe we have to take responsibility as the final arbiter in the event of a conflict or a denial. Hopefully we'd see very few of those instances, that I'm going to rely upon our Development Services Department and our art people to come together. Councilman Roth?
Yeah, just real quick, as far as the First Amendment part of this, now, because these are places where the public has no choice but to drive by and see these things, are we capable of keeping like nudity off the walls, and are we capable of keeping the 4-letter words off the walls? Would that be a violation of First Amendment?
I mean, I think we have the ability to set parameters where there's nothing obscene or nothing that is inflammatory with respect to curse words, things of that nature. We talked about just to bring everybody back sort of to the conversation that we had with the realm of this. We talked about this would not be considered a sign, right? We would not allow for any type of commercial message to be displayed on the mural, because that would then kick it into being a commercial sign. And we don't want to have commercial signage. We want to take it out of the realm of commercial signage, put it in the public art side. And secondly, we don't want to allow for commercial message because we don't want to run afoul of off-premise advertising, which would get us into a realm of having billboards in the city if we allowed for some off-premise commercial message signage to be advertised. So kicking it out of the realm of commercial speech and stipulating parameter-wise that it should be primarily majority pictorial in nature, with a small percentage that could be wording. Those are some of the confinements that we can sort of mold it. So we have the ability to do that. But once we set those parameters, you're opening the door to this, and we can tee it up and say that you're encouraged to do murals that reflect the history and the cultural significance of the Southwest neighborhood, the history and the cultural significance of the city in relation to the 2 national parks, those types of things. But someone may not follow that to the T, and then we don't get to be the content police once we open that door. So just as long as everyone knows that, I mean, that's the issue that I see, is that we're not going to be able to get into the, well, I don't like that, or I do like that. That's what's going to get us in trouble with respect to the First Amendment.
Gotcha. So would it be fair to say that we could actually restrict text and wording and make it all pictorial?
Well, I can certainly look at that from the case law. I think that we're really sort of pushing the envelope a little bit if we completely delve into that it has to be all pictorial. But I certainly think that we can put a limitation with respect to what that percentage should be.
So yeah, you could say maybe 3 words or less, or 10 words or less.
It would be maybe in like no more than 5% or something of
the total
right,
area that to be.
You're going to have different murals that are going to be different sizes,
Sure.
and so ratio, doesn't really play in. Like what might be good for a 10-foot mural might not be good for a 50-foot. So I think if you do some sort of percentage cap that could be applicable across the board is probably the best way to go.
Gotcha. And as far as the fees and permits and things like that, if it does get too expensive, it's going to deter a lot of this too, and I don't want to see that happen. And I don't want to see them, again, coming here and always asking us to waive those fees as well. So there has to be a good compromise, I think, for, what is it truly worth to, have that mural put on the wall, but not to make it so expensive and so cumbersome that it just deters them, because I think the whole attraction is to create this avenue or Maori Drive for art. And if we make it too hard, it just won't happen anyway. So just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. So, this is a discussion item, so, Councilwoman?
I just wanted to add that I like option 5 very much. I think that, I think what's the best part of having PAC involved, of course, it's arts related. And I mentioned it before when you brought it up that I had joined a few of their meetings to discuss it. And I just didn't see the voting aspect falling on them. But I love that they would be involved. I love that then we would have them as, to be able to suggest muralists, to be in contact with local businesses. So I do love that that option. I would agree with that completely. As far as the wording, I would really like everybody to just do a little research if you haven't already, and just look up what would make a successful mural program in a city. Obviously, one of the first things is to not add too many layers, but it is always the community buy-in. I lost my train of thought. We approved the kicks, and that had a beautiful saying about being the peace that you wish to see in the world. So just do a little bit more research and see what are those parameters we want to set. I agree completely. Nudity, profanity, any type of belittling another race, another religion. I think we can definitely do something along those lines. And that is where I have been focusing the most on how can we set these parameters that will protect us from the things that we're afraid of seeing. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Shelley?
Mayor, I guess I have some questions on, and I'm okay, option 5 sounds like a good potential compromise, but I guess my concern with option 5 is that one of the reasons I think we're all a little, I think we all love the program, or at least I love the program. I think some of the concerns that I've heard from some of my colleagues up here, though, is that the concern is, what are we going to end up with, and is it going to be controversial? Is it going to be something that that we maybe acknowledge as art, but maybe we prefer it not be put on one of our roadways and be publicly accessible. But then, as the attorneys are expressing, we are very limited in how we can manage some of that. So my concern, I guess, is if staff makes a recommendation, staff is always, almost always, if it meets the bare minimum, they're going to have to provide a recommendation of approval, would be my concern. And so if staff is always providing that recommendation of approval because they're not able to really be policymakers, we or the Public Arts Committee is the only position to maybe make some sort of nuanced argument that may allow us to deny something that we really don't want to be there, even though it could be legally problematic. So that's the only concern, is that if we have staff start making a recommendation, it's almost always going to come to us if it meets the basic criteria as a recommendation for approval. The Public Art Committee may or may not back that up, or they may vote against it, and then it comes in our court as kind of the arbitrator. But from a legal perspective, we now have a staff recommendation as part of that legal argument later in the future. So I guess that's my question to the attorneys or to staff is, if we ever wanted to take a stand and find a way to nuance that, does it hurt our case by having staff weigh in on that with a recommendation of approval and a First Amendment type argument for interpretation of art in some capacity? And that would be my only concern of having that hybrid. And if you say no, it doesn't matter, then I'm okay with that. But that's my big concern.
Well, certainly the more layers you have, the more records you're creating, which in some cases may work to your detriment, but not in this case. I mean, I'm sorry, may work in favor for you, but in this case would probably work to your detriment by creating a record. And the more language that you have, and the more you're able to show, you're clearly in the realm of First Amendment free speech, and it's not teeing us up in the best position for a potential challenge that may or may not come.
And more specifically, I guess, to the staff report is my most biggest concern as well, and that is staff would likely always end up having to give if it came in and had 5% wording, and it was a certain size, and it had been filed right, and the boxes had been checked, all the right boxes had been checked, and the content is very questionable, staff is not going to be able to render a negative opinion on that, because again, now you're getting into the free speech interpretation. And so what I believe is staff will always then turn around and say it checked all the right boxes, and then it's going to come to a policy-making body, whether it be the Public Art Committee or us directly at the council level, to potentially have to then take a stand to say, well, we think it's insulting, or we think that it's offensive, but in a beyond First Amendment right perspective. So that would be my concern with staff being on the record at some point. So I'd almost prefer it come to the Public Art Committee and then to us, if that's the goal, is to have us weigh in at some point, or maybe skip Public Art Committee altogether if the goal is to have the council always kind of weigh into that fray, and then that would kind of streamline it, but have it into our doorstep. So that would be my only, I guess, concerns, what I would raise.
I would just in any one of these options, I think staff would do the initial intake, right, and say the application is deficient, or you need X, Y, and Z to complete the application. So I think in any one of these, you could limit staff to just do the initial intake, make sure that the application is correct and it matches, they've submitted the correct plan, they've submitted, that sort of stuff, and then that just gets forwarded in however you all decide to do it. They don't have to take a position.
Councilman Roth.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to kind of make that same suggestion, is not let staff make a recommendation, just move it forward saying it does or it does not meet the criteria of what the ordinance is. And that way they don't have a say. They just, like James explains, they're the intake, and then they move it on to the PAC board. So I think that helps Councilman Shelley's thing, and it helps me too. So I think I like that. Thank you.
My concern with the option that I propose, the option 5, is you have two different. You've got a checks and balances. You've got staff making a determination, I guess implicitly, whether or not the proposed art complies with the ordinance. And then you have the art committee injecting their expertise in the art world as to a recommendation from an artistic perspective, I guess, as to whether or not it should be approved. I don't know that, and as I said at the meeting, we discussed it. I don't want Joe to be the final arbiter. Okay, so that takes injecting the Public Art Committee into it, keeps us out of it, makes it move potentially faster. And if the Public Art Committee is in accord with him, then there's that checks and balance in place. And there's always going to be, by adopting this program, we are opening the door to First Amendment challenges. So either we close that door and say no murals, or we take a leap of faith and rely upon our staff and our appointees to the Public Art Committee.
Well, yeah, and I agree. And I think the way you present it is that Development Services would be the intake person. If it gets past them as far as meeting the criteria, and then it goes to the PAC board and they approve or deny, if they approve, it doesn't come to us. If they deny, then we have to hear it. Right. Well, yeah, I mean, because if Development Services pushed it forward, it meets the criteria, but it doesn't put them on the record as approving it. It just says they pushed it through the system to the PAC board for a final decision, and if they get a denial at the PAC board, then they have the right to appeal it to the council. It doesn't automatically come to us. They have to appeal that decision. So
if I could, just for clarification, because I think I'm understanding it to be two different avenues. And Mayor, you had said that initially staff would receive it, make a recommendation, approve or deny, send it to the PAC. PAC would look at that and then make a recommendation to approve or deny. If both staff and the PAC both say good, approved, then it's done. But in the situation that you're referring to, Councilman Roth, staff could take the application in. They would say, yes, application is complete based on the criteria, but they're not going to be looking at it and making a recommendation for approval or denial. They're just going to be kicking it to the PAC without a recommendation, just that the application's complete, they've submitted all the paperwork that's necessary and given us whatever the requirements are, but they are not going to opine on or make a recommendation on the actual mural.
Right, so my thought process is, if it gets through Development Services, it meets the criteria of the ordinance, whenever that ordinance is produced. So if it doesn't get past Development Services, it's not a denial, it just didn't meet the requirements. So if it gets past Development Services, then it goes to the PAC, and they have the final decision-making process. If it passes, or if they give a recommendation of approval, it's over. It goes forward. If they deny it, the applicant has the option to, what was the word I used? Appeal to the council. Does that work? I mean,
That's option 3. I mean, that's the current option 3 that's outlined.
okay.
Mayor, if I may.
Well, but
I see what you're saying too. I mean,
yeah, because I think implicitly, and think of it in terms of a land use application. Not only does Development Services make sure that the application is complete, it then reviews it for whether or not it complies with whatever provision of our code is dealing with it. So we would have a public art ordinance. We would have a mural ordinance. So Development Services would make sure the application is complete and do an analysis as to whether or not the proposed piece of art, in their opinion, complies with the terms of the ordinance. And it would be a dual track for just a general approval. And look, let's face it, implicit in that is some content approval. You know, art's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. And we're going to ask them to apply their artistic taste to the proposed mural. But, and you're right, if both of those arms are in accord, it goes no further. And if either finds that it's not acceptable for whatever reason, it comes to us, but it avoids having one group or one person being the sole arbiter of something that this council may have never approved if it had come to us with a conflicting recommendation.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I understand Shelley's point of view, because you don't want to put that, if there is a lawsuit for First Amendment violations, you don't want to have a trail of approvals throughout the process, and it gets to us and bang, you know, we're stuck with a suit. And I get what you say too. I don't want to scrap the mural program, because I think Homestead is hungry for that. But I don't know what the perfect scenario is, if there's even a perfect scenario. I mean,
Well, maybe I can make a recommendation, certainly, that you all can think about. So, this is a pilot program that you're trying to launch and see how it works. And so I know that there is, we want to involve the Public Art Committee. So, I mean, the draft ordinance, even the overall concept of the mural program has already gone to PAC, where Councilman Bailey presented it. I mean, certainly there's the opportunity, once we get the ordinance in a much more camera-ready version, that you could go back to the PAC and have them make recommendations on it, then come to you. And, you know, it just depends. I mean, if you want to start out with the first couple of months or the year to see how this goes, you could just have staff do the intake, and just like we do final plats, right? I mean, in that case, staff's making a recommendation and it's sending it to you. But if you don't want that, then staff could just do the intake, say that it's complete, and then put it to you all. And you can see how that rolls out and see what that looks like. And then you can always make adjustments from there. If you feel that, okay, we see how this is rolling out, then, you know, maybe we can now have staff in the PAC look at this. We feel comfortable with it. But at least you all will get to decide and see how that's coming, what's coming, and then make adjustments from there. I mean, there's not really a right way or a wrong way. There's advantages and disadvantages to certain aspects of this review. And, you know, maybe that's a better way to approach the pilot program as you roll it out.
Mayor, may I? This application for approval will be for how long? How long would the mural be up if it's approved?
So that's something that we touched on in the overall scheme that we sort of brought and talked about. Nothing's concrete, but initial conversations that I've had with Councilwoman Bailey were that possibly it would be a year with the ability to renew the mural for like another year, but certainly that's something that, you know, you don't have to do. I mean, these are not meant to be permanent installations. If you're really trying to get a mural program like a Wynwood, those are constantly changing. And so, you know, you can start out low, and then if it's successful, you can always increase it. You know, with the parameters that someone has to maintain it in good working order. If there's graffiti or the building starts crumbling, then they have to fix it. They have the ability so that the mural doesn't look like it's weathered and tethered and in really bad shape. So you want it to be pristine. So with those caveats, you certainly have the ability to say, all right, I think it's unreasonable to say somebody's going to do that and spend the time, and they're only going to be able to do it for 3 months or 6 months. I think at a minimum, you probably realistically would want to give somebody a year, maybe, to do that.
Or they would want to make sure that it would be a design that the community would want to keep so that they can get that extra 6 month to a year extension approved. Are there any provisions that allow council to suspend the program at any time should we make the approval to the ordinance?
You can certainly set it up that way.
Okay.
In this pilot program. I mean, you certainly have the ability to do that.
Okay, and James, in conversations prior, you had assured me that there were state statutes in place with regards to obscenities and nudity. Those would
Right, well,
apply.
there's a state statute on obscenity that controls. And so, under that state statutory scheme, anyone who is doing something or providing obscene materials or things of that nature would fall under that statute and could be cited
Okay,
under
and
that
so
statute.
is it safe to say that Development Services' role would be to also ensure that that state statute is not violated in any way prior to it going to PAC?
Yeah, I certainly think that we could do that.
Okay, so I would be comfortable with option 3, with a 6-month approval with up to an additional 6-month to a year extension, and with the provisions of being able to suspend the program at any time, with the assurities that the state statutes are in compliance and that the application is complete and the Public Art Committee is in approval. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Council Fletcher?
Yeah, so the more and more I think about this, I kind of whitewash this in my mind. I looked at the 4 different options and I said, hey, I feel comfortable with option 4. But as we have more discussion on this, it brings to light, I think, a lot of different, we need to jump into a little more detail here, I think, in the long run in order to come up with whatever our final product's going to be. I think I have probably 10 to 15 additional questions that I think I want to take offline and have discussions directly with Mr. White, and that will make me more comfortable with going forward with this. I know we're going to move forward with some type of draft that's going to come back to us here in the next couple of weeks, but I do have some additional questions that I think that I need to get clarified in my mind, and along with that, if we look at setting up a fixed fee schedule for these type of activities in the future, that cover the basic application process, I think that would, make this a level playing field for all of those who want to move forward with coming to the city with one of these applications. So I don't know what that fee schedule is. There is a cost to what we do, but I think it shouldn't be that expensive, noting that most of these folks are staff personnel and on salary anyway. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman, what was your proposal for initial 6-month permit? My fear is that really doesn't make financial sense when you pay for a permit. Paint's not cheap, and it's only going to be there 6 months. It kind of seems to defeat the purpose. And I know that someone mentioned kind of a rolling mural program in Wynwood, and maybe hopefully we'll get there someday. But for the pilot program, I mean, just thinking out loud, I would think that 1 year would be a minimum to make it worth someone's while to put the sweat equity and the dollars for materials and permit app fees into the mix. So, yeah, exactly.
I was seeing it more as like an insurance policy, where if you didn't like the mural, it takes the burden off of us of having to potentially violate someone's First Amendment right and deny them. It gets that liability off our shoulders and say, well, if you really, really, really want to pay for it twice, go ahead and pay for it twice. Or if it's something that complies to the appeal of the community and it's acceptable in our eyes, then we would allow it to stay. You would get an extension for an extra 6 months, a year, whatever.
I agree. The damage is done on day one, not on day 189 or 179.
Thank you, Mayor. That was something that we discussed the very first time it came before us, and I think that the initial one had a 2-year re-application, and that would be a really small fee, but it would be a way for us to be able to see that they were upholding their end. But I think a year would be perfectly fine, even for the very first one. You know, if we want to say 6 months, obviously this is something that's going to take a long time to turn into something amazing. And for Wynwood having absolutely no rules, if you look at all of their murals, I think there is, from what I could find, one topless lady with a big necklace, and maybe someone smoking something that looked like a cigarette. Those were the two most offensive things that I could see. There was something that looked a little political. But for the rest, these are people that have a vested interest in our area. It is their own personal building. It's not something that they are going to want to portray something so negative. But I am perfectly okay with setting some parameters that make it easier on us to be able to say, you know what, it was great of us to try, but we're not ready for this yet. So, just wanted to add that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Well, how about I put?
Mayor,
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Vice Mayor.
that's okay. I just wanted to weigh in a little bit. I just have some concerns about the fact that, well, I don't have concerns about regulating free speech because I don't think we should. I have concerns about the interpretation, the artist's interpretation. To me, it goes beyond obscenity and nudity. I'm thinking about what if there's a piece of art that is inflammatory or insensitive for a particular culture. Homestead is not like Wynwood. This is a completely different community. We're very unique. And I'm just concerned that we can potentially be opening ourselves up for blowback. Yes, there may be checks and balances in order to make sure Development Services checks off the boxes, the Public Art Committee does their due diligence. But if there's a piece of art that is insensitive, Development Services will get the blowback. The Public Art Committee will get the blowback. We're going to get the blowback. The onus will be on us. Our faces, our necks will have to be on the line if something is potentially offensive. To put it in practical terms for you, I'm not sure that the entire community would like to see a Black Lives Matter piece of art in the community. When the Black Lives Matter was, I think, in Washington, D.C., there was a lot of blowback about that. What if that happens here? I'm just concerned about what can potentially go there. Conceptually, it makes a lot of sense. Wynwood looks great. I visited several times, but this is a entirely different community, and I just have some concerns about what can potentially go there that can be insensitive or inflammatory, and you can't regulate it. So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how I can support it. I'm just concerned about that aspect of it, and I just wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Well, I think our attorneys and staff are looking for some direction, and we've been all over the place. Councilwoman Bailey, this is your baby. You want to try to distill down something in the form of a motion for some direction to at least go forward and have another discussion. I know Councilman Fletcher and others will have some private conversations that perhaps can be dealt with as the drafting goes forward.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that maybe a good next step would be, I think everybody kind of has a little bit of a feel as far as the procedure for the review process. I think although we've all had a lot of different things said, I think we all are kind of leaning towards the same thing. Maybe a good next step would be to have a few different options as far as what these ordinance parameters could look like. And we just continue the conversations with an ordinance.
In terms of general artistic guidelines as we're permitted to do within an ordinance, and then perhaps once we better understand those, come at it from who gets the review and the final say, and in what order, I guess. Okay? Is that, Councilman Shelley?
So we certainly can do that, and it would just be a whole, basically, reserved for future input, where we would, once we decide what the procedural review process would be out of these options or some combination thereof, we could just then plug that into the ordinance.
Thank you, James. Councilman Shelley?
Yeah, and again, for me, the big key is the cost here. I mean, I think we need to have that discussion, so we need numbers, because ultimately, if it's one review or 25 different reviews, if the cost is the same, then I'm less concerned about the number of layers as to go through, to the point that it doesn't discourage people because of the time consumption. But the cost is the key for me.
So I can share with you my earlier conversations with development services staff, and I certainly can work with the city manager's office and staff. But I think the general consensus was that we're not talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. We're talking about hundreds of dollars, within the $500 to $250 range for an application, since it would be handled internal to staff. And, it would be on an agenda that you're already having. The only caveat would be that, if you put the PAC into the mix, you could potentially be scheduling and having a PAC meeting with this on as the only agenda item. So,
And are there any advertising requirements for this type of issue, where they don't have to worry about paying the advertising fee?
So currently not, as we have it set up. This would, we could tee it up. I mean, just regular resolution. In whatever format it comes, it'll be approved as a resolution. And under our code currently, and under Florida law, there's not a statutory notice requirement that we have to be concerned about, other than our just regular agenda publication notice.
All right, so that's helpful for me as we go through the process, to know that we're going to keep the costs low, and it really doesn't matter if it's option 1 or option 5. They're all, we can control that cost, and it's going to be minuscule. Even if we decide to waive it, or even if we decide to subsidize it, it won't be a huge subsidy. It won't be a big to the bottom line. So that's helpful. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, that, and if we could keep the entire process down to 4 weeks somehow, that would helps the reasonableness of the whole situation. So, Mr. White, are you clear on where you think the direction we're sending you?
Mayor, I'm not. I just want to ask a question before James answers that. What I'm hearing is that I understand we have concerns about the fee, we have concerns about the timeline, which we can address. And now we're talking about coming back with potential parameters for what the boxes are that need to be checked. And as you suggested, Mayor, then maybe we can back into some of these other decisions. But is the next discussion about this just about that? We're not suggesting we come up with the draft ordinance, are we? Or are we going to have another discussion at a COW with those potential parameters?
In my mind, I'm envisioning at some point we have a public conversation about the general ordinance.
Right, that's kind of what I mean.
Governing this,
like the ordinance
without the procedural.
Okay, so then it would be the boxes that need to be checked, whether they're in an ordinance or not, but it would be everything that the ordinance would include,
Correct.
potentially.
Yes.
Okay. At a COW.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
We good?
Yeah, I could do it in a draft ordinance format for you all to look at, so you can see structure, or I can just, do it in sections for you without draft format. So I can work with staff to figure out what's the best way to tee up the agenda item, and we can come back
way to do that.
At a future COW for discussion.
Very good. Thank you all. Anything further?
No, Mayor.
Good, thank you. Do I have a
No,
motion
sorry,
to
Mr.
adjourn?
Mayor.
Hang on one second.
I have to request a couple of executive sessions, if that's okay. I'd like to request a session in the matter of Ray v. City of Homestead et al. It's case number 121CV20488 in the Southern District. The matter number Hernandez v. City of Homestead et al. Case number 121CV21536, also in the Southern District. McDonough v. City of Homestead et al., case number 121CV21538. And the matter of Shiver v. City of Homestead et al., case number 121CV21537. Thank you.
Sounds like that's going to be a very time-consuming session or sessions.
I hope not. Each one actually shouldn't take very long. It's an update on mostly procedural items, things that have happened since the last time we had the discussion on the initial matter.
Because there may be some conflict prior to our next council meeting.
Okay.
Was my thought. Man, if you need to do it not later than then, maybe we need to have a separate standalone session. Y'all work that out.
We'll discuss. There are deadlines in play, but we might be able to push it off a little bit.
Thank you. Now, Councilman?
Just one thing real quick. Just to follow up on I think the previous council meeting when we had development services there and we were going to start to form these workshops. Just a reminder that I'm still thinking about attending a workshop sometime in the near future.
Yes, we'll provide you with the timeline. Thank you, Councilman, for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Can we do that anything further? We have a motion to adjourn, and I'm sure we have a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks for using WebEx.